And I feel that slop isn't new. It's like someone who just has arrived off the street, doesn't know anything about what you do, but is generally pretty clever. You're like, how do I get this person to do the thing that I need to do? I just need a picture of the human intestine. I just a core skill to learn is how to task the machine with doing the thing that you need. And that is about creating difference. And that's kind of like the opposite of what the machine can sort of do. Yelling at software is the new way to operate things.
Welcome back to the Code and Content Podcast, the podcast for conversations at the intersection of code and content. A warning at the top of today's episode. We are going to be talking about AI, but don't go anywhere. Please don't turn the podcast off. I promise you, this is a hype-free zone. I wanted to talk in real terms about AI with someone who I know knows this space better than anyone else, and that's Evan, one of our co-founders here at Sanity. Understanding how to use this tool and how Evan mentions it's like a new skill that you have to learn is how to work with AI tools. This is incredibly important. Don't just give into the scaremongering that you might read on social sites that it's all over and you're going to lose your job. There is actually a way to work with these tools to get really great results. And there is, of course, the flip side of that. If you don't know how to work with them, you can get really middling results, specifically when it comes to writing content powered by AI, where you get really disappointing outputs. So learning how to use these tools, learning the new skills that you'll need to adapt to. AI is here. The future is not going to be the same as the past. You are going to have to get used to it. And I know I've really sort of crossed that threshold myself recently, getting used to voice dictating code and using cursor instead of VS Code, all of those sorts of things. This is just what we do now. This is how we work. So learning how to best do that work, whether you're developing or whether you're writing content, AI is going to be a part of it from now on. So best get on board and understand how to work with these tools. And I think Evan's got some great insights on how to do that. Have a listen through. If you've got any comments, there's anything we didn't cover, any questions you're left with, please comment in the YouTube video below or hit me a message on Twitter as well. For now, enjoy this conversation with Evan. Cool. Evan, thank you for joining me today on this episode. Mostly, I want to talk to you about AI because you've been at the center of a lot of those things recently. And as every episode in this podcast series is about content creation, primarily about AI as it relates to content. Of course, we know AI can create code and all of this sort of thing. I guess what really inspired this episode was a conversation we had recently where I had been demoing some AI features and I asked the AI to create content and it spewed out the average sort of thing because I just said, write a blog post. And it wrote a really boring, really horrible blog post. And I just said, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. And I accepted it. And you said, no, that's the worst thing you can do is just like ask the least amount of detail and then just accept the first thing it says. So this is the slop that now pervades our lives everywhere. Tell me about what it is about getting quality content out of AI systems as opposed to just accepting the first thing it gives us because it's going to be the average of everything.
I think it's about expectations and intents.
Mm-hmm.
I think the situation that you had was that you expected it to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
So your intent then became just to ask it to do something nominal.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it did something nominal, that reaffirmed your bias that it was going to be bad. So you were kind of like, look, it did the bad thing.
And it is okay to call me lazy on camera, Tweak. You really will.
I think that's how many people approach this because you have to, I think the way that these things just do the most, they do the most probable thing.
Mm-hmm.
So your job is to make the thing that you need the most probable thing for the model to do.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the thing that you want it to do, that you need, is, unless you want like the straight average of everything, it's a deeply improbable thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to like a person, like a good way of thinking about these things is as infinite interns. Like it's just like someone who just has arrived off the street, doesn't know anything about what you do, but is generally pretty clever.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, how do I get this person to do the thing that I need to do? How do I make my output the probable thing? And then if you start there, then it becomes a question of context and tasking and intent and expectation. And then you have a situation that you can work with.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of interesting because I'm coming from the outside of AI, like, oh, AI is going to take everyone's jobs. It's going to do everything for you and all that sort of thing. And so that's the frame of mind I come in with. But it sounds like perhaps that vision's been oversold. Is that fair? Because it sounds like there's still work to do, right? You still have to.
Yeah.
The more work you do with the AI, the better those results will be. It's not just an instant. Your job is done because of AI.
I think that's what the slop is about, right? That's what and I feel that slop isn't new. That AI slop isn't new. It is like this.
That's what it was trained on.
Yeah, no, well, and also like the same feeling I get from a content farm, I get from the AI slop.
Yeah,
I get it's like low intent, and again, it's kind of like I just need something here, and I don't care. I don't respect you as a reader. I don't respect the situation. It's just instrumental. It's just words or something. I just need words on a page, and it has like it's very functional. Often, what that thing does, I just need a picture of the human intestine digesting corn. I don't care about its accuracy. I just need that sort of picture. And so to me, that doesn't feel new. I feel it's like a human behavioral pattern that I've seen many, many times. And it's just applied to a domain with a generation, just like getting the end result. The marginal cost of it is approaching zero. So we're getting more of this stuff, but the pattern is old, but we're going to have an infinite amount of this stuff.
Yeah. So is there a transition period where we have to just learn better, like people's expectations have to be level set? Do you feel like the technology needs to catch up, or people's perception of how the technology works needs to catch up?
I think it's actually a new skill. I think it's actually a new thing to learn to do. And I think it's difficult I think it's been oversold kind of, because we're kind of like, it's going to do work, but it's not magical.
Yeah.
So it can't know what you need.
It can't know what you don't tell it, right?
Yeah. So that's the skill to learn, is how to task the machine with doing the thing that you need.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty, looks a little bit like working in an organization and working on a team and communicating with people and coordinating work that needs to happen.
I think that was the light bulb moment for me. Yeah. A terrible micromanager. I'd make a terrible team manager.
Yeah, exactly.
So like the thought of having to pencil out a whole bunch of tasks to people first, or in an LLM, that's the difficult part. But that sounds like that would actually yield better results.
Yeah, no, I think that's what that's what Create is, the AI, like the collaborative AI writing tool that we put out tries to do, is that it tries to let you give the model enough context for it to do useful work, and then having it deliver that work in a way where it doesn't become like a large proofreading exercise. Because what very often happens is that it gets things slightly wrong. And then it, like when it's generating a lot of stuff, it gets one thing wrong just with tone of voice. Then it keeps on going in that trite, bad way.
Yeah.
But if you can sort of, as if you were co-writing with a person sitting next to you, if you can nip that at an early point so that you get like a solid piece of writing, the chances that the next thing is going to be your thing goes up.
Yeah, so to treat it more like a collaborator rather than a pure creator.
Yeah, and I think sort of like, I think that's how you need to think about it, because it's kind of like when you write, you're trying to create difference, either for brand or for you trying to be clear. And that is about creating difference. And that's kind of like the opposite of what the machine can sort of do, because the machine can only do the average.
Yeah.
So it's a game. It's kind of like, how do you get it to do the thing that you need? And this goes for code, this goes for text, it goes for imagery, and I think the thing that's starting to happen now is that we are just immersed in stuff that is made by machines. And sometimes it's wielded by people who have great taste, know what they're doing, know what they need, and to task the machines well. And then you get results that are actually good. And I think that's what the change is.
So there's always going to be space for a unique tone of voice, or that differentiator, like you say. Like the AI is not going to be necessarily capable of creating that for you, but somebody who's got a unique angle when using those AI tools and can instruct that machine correctly is going to leverage that for the benefit.
Yeah. And I think we're coming from, if you think about this, this might be, feel free to edit this part out, but it's kind of like, I think if you see this in a very long time perspective, if you go back to oral traditions, then every message was shaped for the receiver. Like everything was highly personalized when we could only speak to each other. And then we've gotten like technologies of machine reproduction that have flattened this so that you have to say the same thing to everyone. And I think what's interesting now is that these technologies can reintroduce more local context into more communication.
Yeah.
So if you look at it in really, and we've never had mass communication with the ability to change the communication for
and personalize it for the recipient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that feels to me like a completely new sort of thing.
Yeah. So I suppose like one thing to publish the homepage and the H1 at the top of the page is just the same for everyone around the world. And then there's a version of personalization where you get some A/B testing. But yeah, like you could essentially customize. You could leverage a large language model to customize that wording for that specific person based on some context you know about them.
So I think it's going to be. So I think that's what's going to change here. That these things are going to become more like plastic and more flexible and more, and also
not just used to create one static output.
Yeah, and we're also seeing that these things become a lot cheaper. That suddenly, like just in the past 7 days, we've seen like
depending on the time of the release of this episode. Yeah, this is right around the deep seek. How many AIs will be released between now and when I release?
Yeah, there was like there was a new one that was on par with R1 released last night, kind of.
Yeah.
So the price of these things. So the price of this was cut to 1/30th in the past week. So it looks like it's going to be a commodity. It's almost going to be unmetered.
Yeah.
So the question is, what do things look like then?
Yeah.
But then I think it's still about the same thing. It's still about this. It's still about what you're trying to say.
It doesn't change how you use it. Yeah.
No, it has like the perspective of the communicator hasn't really changed. And I think different kinds of communication channels will use these technologies in very different ways.
Yeah. I think one moment I had of clarity recently, because I guess you open up a new document and you get a blank page and sort of staring at you. And I don't always know the structure of what I want to write the first time I'm going to write something. But what I tried differently instead was to have a conversation with the AI. I think it was Claude or something I was using at the time. But I sort of told her what my idea was that I needed to write it out first. And we had a back and forward for quite a while first. And I found that incredibly useful because then at the end I was able to say, well, summarize my thoughts, and it sort of created the first version of the document that way. So it wasn't necessarily wasn't just getting the AI to write the document, and it wasn't just like me writing a document on my own, but it was sort of forming my thoughts and then having them summarized into a document. So having whole other ways to get into the content creation process is pretty amazing too.
I think better in dialogue than when I sit down and just with a blank page. Also, when I try to formulate, even though the other person isn't contributing much, I did think it's like a better mode.
Yeah,
I sort of think that me in dialogue with another entity, it isn't better than me just doing your own head. Yeah. So I think for me that is that feels radical. The ability to just open a window and be like and have a dialogue with someone that is that something that just knows a lot of stuff about different things. Seems very useful, but also I think also when you're doing stuff for a genre you might not know, like business. In business terms, there are very many different sociolects spoken by boardrooms and lawyers, and you're sort of like reformat this rambling, wordy thing so that it will look right for this kind of person doing this kind of work. Is something that I find very helpful. Just in which gets back to like before you would have those AI tools.
you might not be well aware of how that audience speaks. And so you'd be speaking in your language to their language, but now you can write your thoughts, but have it transformed into what the receiver would want to hear it.
Exactly. Or have it sort of critiqued. So you're kind of like, I wrote this to this person doing this kind of work. What would you think? I'm just trying to order a renovation from a carpenter. Have I specified the right things?
Yeah.
Or using the right words? And it's going to nail that.
Yeah. So, I mean, these sorts of the conversations that give me hope, right? Because as you say, these are new skills to learn or new behaviors. You've got new ways to go about it that, if you've just opened a blank document forever. But this is what's available to you. Or certainly sort of being able to speak to an expert on any topic. So like even before this, I've never set up a podcast studio like this before, but before we started, I took a photo of the setup from behind the scenes and I sent it to ChatGPT and I said, give me some advice. And it said I did mostly a good job. Like it was pretty happy with me. So, I mean, the viewer can be the judge of, but it's just like, being able to talk to an expert on any topic, even if they do have the averagest version of the basics, it helps.
I think so too. And I think I think it's also interesting for when thinking about sort of making user interfaces for these things, because it's not only a new skill for the user, it's also a new skill for people who do like user experience and sort of UI. And it's kind of like human factors in HCI goes back to like having people operate a fighter jet under stress and not having it crash. That's sort of what these things, that's where the field comes from. It comes from military applications and these like systems that have inner state, and then you need to read that state, you need to operate on it. And that's what all of this sort of comes out of. But now you have this completely different tool. And these systems are brittle. You need to know what intuition is, and it's sort of like it's very hard to do in a very specific way. But for people who make interfaces, you now have this completely different toolbox that's brittle in new ways, where the metaphor of the user, what the user thinks they're talking to, is or what shapes their expectation is the expectation they would have of other people. It's theory of mind. That is the underlying metaphor for what you're doing. So sort of like, how do you design with that? How do you make a user interface with that? And how do you interface that with the brittle buttons and dials and fighter jet stuff that harkens back to the Second World War? How do these things interface well?
I guess like as a user of apps too, my thoughts have started to go to, if you open up an app and it's new for you to learn, if I don't know where this thing is, but if there's a search box there, I kind of wish every search box in every app was now an AI thing, because I know this app is capable of this thing, but I just want to describe that I can do to it, I know we're sort of getting a bit off track here, but I guess there's so many more use cases to be unlocked.
And I think like yelling at software is the new way to operate things. To get to know things, and I think that's reasonable to assume at this point that you will be able to do that, to have that mode of operation.
I can't imagine UI going away. I don't want it to go away entirely, but I do want to under that stress situation, or like in a hurry. Like I don't want to have to learn this app. I just want to tell you what the thing I want to do. If this app is simple enough to pull that off. So, no, that's a good chat. I think that's really interesting. There's a lot of good points about not necessarily just taking the first thing that AI gives you, but trying to come up with new strategies of, if that's the sort of forward thinking and backwards plan. If I want this piece of content and I want it to be good, but what are the steps I need to take in order, with the AI's help, to get that piece of content right?
I think I often see also people making the mistake that the machine sort of learns between sessions. They think that it's persistent.
Oh, really?
Because they're modeling on So GPT now has like memories and sort of, but even in other contexts, people assume that it will, because you're modeling it on humans. So you think that it's going, why wouldn't it remember things?
Human behavior.
It's going to remember things, right? So
the less human they make it, the better for me. So it's scary enough as it is.
So I think it's kind of like the model is that you have this clever intern, and they've just woken up, and they're like, and then you start talking, and you're like, I want you to write me an article. And that's the sort of mode that they are every every time you use them for something, they are just born fresh into the world.
Yeah, clicking the new chat button. That's your unboxing a new intern.
Exactly. You're like, oh, and they're like,
yeah.
So I think that's the model to have.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks for your time.
Of course.